Captain Elias had faced many councils, leaders, and even warlords in his years of service, but nothing prepared him for the vast alien hall where silence spoke louder than words and the shadows seemed alive with stories of the past. He stepped forward carefully, his boots echoing across polished stone that shimmered with colors no human eye had seen before, and though he carried the title of diplomat, he felt less like an envoy and more like a trespasser in a realm that was not built for human presence. Yet the queen who sat upon the throne radiated such calm authority that he could not look away, her eyes deep and ancient, as though they had seen not only wars but the rise and fall of entire civilizations. And when she rose, the chamber trembled, not from violence, but from the weight of reverence shown by her own guards who lowered their weapons and bowed lower than soldiers ever should. Elias, trying to bridge the gap of silence, forced a polite smile and asked the first question that came to mind. Were you once military? Thinking perhaps she had earned her throne through strategy or conquest, as many rulers had, but instead of answering with pride or a long tale of victories, the queen tilted her head, her lips curving into a subtle smile that was neither mocking nor kind, and her voice, soft yet carrying to the hall like a distant echo, replied, "Higher than that." 3 words that struck Elias harder than any weapon, because they carried not only mystery but also a promise of power beyond his understanding. And he suddenly felt as though he had asked the wrong question, as though he had pulled at a thread that might unravel more than he could handle. Yet the queen did not explain, leaving the air thick with unspoken truths, while Elias's heart beat faster, each thought a reminder that he was far from safe, not because of immediate danger, but because he had stepped into a game where he did not know the rules. And as he studied her calm smile, he realized she was not merely answering him. She was testing him, waiting to see how a human would react to something that hinted at authority above generals, above fleets, above war itself. And though he wanted to press her, to demand clarity, his instincts told him patience was wiser, for rushing could make him appear small in a place where greatness was measured not by words, but by presence. So he bowed slightly, more out of respect for her mystery than her throne, and when he lifted his eyes again, the queen was still watching him, her gaze steady, almost searching, as if she could see past his uniform and medals into the very core of who he was. And the silence that followed was heavier than before, filling the vast hall until Elias felt the weight pressing on his shoulders. But within that pressure was also a strange sense of invitation, as though the queen's answer was not a dismissal but a door left half open, daring him to step through. And in that moment he understood that this meeting was not about peace treaties or negotiations. It was about something far greater, something hidden. And he, a lone human among towering aliens, had unknowingly been drawn into it, his curiosity now a spark that could either light the path forward or burn everything to ash. Captain Elias followed the queen as she rose from her throne and motioned for him to walk beside her, her movement so graceful it seemed she glided rather than stepped. And though no words passed between them at first, Elias felt the weight of every moment, for the silence was not empty but full of unspoken meaning, as if the walls themselves held their breath. The grand hall opened into a corridor lined with tall pillars carved from stone that shimmered with faint light, and upon each pillar were symbols that looked older than any written language Elias had ever seen, glowing softly as though alive. And though he could not read them, he sensed they carried memories of entire ages, perhaps even the lives of those who had once ruled before the queen. And as he walked, he noticed that the guards who had stood so firm in the hall now kept a careful distance, their heads lowered, their eyes never daring to meet hers. And Elias began to wonder if their fear was rooted not in her position as queen, but in something greater, something that placed her beyond ordinary rulers. She led him through archways and chambers until they entered a vast library-like hall where shelves floated in midair, each filled with glowing tablets that hummed softly, and Elias felt a chill as he realized this was no ordinary archive, but a living record of history, knowledge that had survived longer than human civilization itself. And as the queen raised her hand, a tablet floated toward them, opening to reveal streams of light that twisted into shapes, images of battles, treaties, and star systems rising and fading like smoke, showing him a history of empires rising only to fall into dust, yet always guided by a hidden hand. And Elias noticed in each vision there was a figure cloaked in shadow, not a soldier, not a king, but something more, an overseer of destiny. And though the faces changed across time, the presence remained the same, and when the vision faded, the queen's voice broke the Silence, low and steady. The military fights battles, but battles do not shape galaxies. What lies behind thrones, unseen, decides the course of civilizations, and Elias felt a chill because her words were not theory. They were experience, spoken with the certainty of one who had lived it. Yet he could not ask directly what she meant, for something in her gaze told him answers would not come easily. They had to be earned. Still, his curiosity pushed him forward, and he asked why even her. Generals, men and women who commanded fleets larger than anything humanity could imagine, bowed to her with such reverence, and the Queen only walked deeper into the archive, stopping before a sealed door of metal blacker than space, etched with symbols that pulsed faintly like a heartbeat. And though she said nothing, the door slid open at her presence, revealing a chamber where relics stood, ancient crowns, weapons long rusted, scrolls of metal, and most striking of all, a massive chair carved from stone that did not look like it was built, but rather grown from the ground itself. And Elias knew at once this was no throne of decoration. It was a seat of judgment, one that carried a burden heavier than command. And the Queen spoke again, her voice echoing in the chamber. To rule is to lead armies, but to guide is to hold the fates of all who live, and that is higher than war. Her words striking Elias with sudden clarity, that she was not simply a queen, but something closer to a guardian, chosen not to fight, but to ensure survival of entire civilizations. And though he wanted to ask who had chosen her, he hesitated, sensing that the answer would reveal truths too vast for him to fully grasp. Yet as he stood there, the chamber itself seemed to whisper around him, voices faint, as if the relics carried memories of those who once held her position, and he realized that each of them had been more than a leader. They had been keepers of balance, silent hands steering the galaxy through chaos, and the Queen now stood as the latest in that line, her smile no longer just mysterious, but almost burdened, as if carrying secrets too heavy for one being to bear. And Elias understood why the guards feared her, not because she held power, but because she embodied something greater, something beyond titles and ranks, a living reminder that authority was not measured in weapons, but in the ability to decide what battles should even exist. And as he looked upon her, he felt small yet strangely honored, for she had chosen to show him this place, and in her eyes he caught the faintest glimmer of expectation, as if she were waiting to see how a human would respond to truths that could either inspire or terrify. And though questions crowded his mind, he forced himself to stay silent, for instinct told him this was only the beginning, a path that would test not just his loyalty as a diplomat, but his very humanity. And as the chamber doors closed behind them, Elias could not shake the feeling that he had stepped into a story written long before his birth, one that had been waiting for a human to play a role, though whether that role was savior or pawn remained hidden, just like the Queen's secret smile. Elias stood in the chamber of relics with the Queen beside him, the air thick with a strange energy that made his skin prickle, as if invisible currents of power were brushing against him. And though he had seen many wonders in his career, nothing compared to the weight of this room, for every object seemed alive, humming with a silent story. And the Queen's calm presence only deepened the sense that this was not a simple archive, but a sanctuary of secrets that most of her people, perhaps even her generals, had never seen. She walked slowly toward a tall window that revealed a sky filled with stars burning brighter than he had ever witnessed, and with her hands folded neatly behind her, she began to speak, not to boast, but as though each word carried a burden of truth, telling Elias that military power could win battles, but battles were only ripples, while true control lay in the currents beneath, unseen forces that shaped destinies long before armies were ever deployed. And Elias felt his throat dry as he listened, realizing that the Queen's earlier words, higher than that, had not been pride but a statement of fact, for she did not rule as a general or even a monarch in the way humans understood. She was part of something larger, a council hidden beyond the reach of common knowledge, one that held influence over entire star systems, guiding their rise, their fall, and sometimes even their survival. And when Elias asked cautiously how such power could exist without anyone noticing, the Queen only raised her hand, and the chamber responded, light spilling from the relics until the air shimmered and formed into shapes, visions that surrounded him on all sides, showing him galaxies in motion, great fleets clashing, empires collapsing under their own pride, and each time, just as all seemed lost, shadowy figures would step in, unseen yet decisive, bending outcomes not with weapons but with choices that changed the course of history. Choices like granting weaker species a spark of knowledge, or guiding a strong one toward restraint. And Elias saw that the Queen herself stood among these figures, not as a warrior, but as one of the guardians who made sure the galaxy never tipped too far into chaos. And as the vision faded, he could hardly breathe, his mind racing at the thought that he was standing beside someone who had power over destiny itself. Yet instead of feeling threatened, he felt strangely drawn, because her authority was not born of fear or violence, but of wisdom and patience. And still, there was something in her gaze that unsettled him, for it seemed she was measuring him, as if deciding whether humanity could ever stand among such guardians. And when he asked why she was showing him these truths, she did not answer directly, but told him that humanity had caught the attention of the Council, for humans were unlike others, unpredictable, resilient, and able to turn weakness into strength in ways that defied logic. And now, the question remained whether they were ready to rise or doomed to fall as so many others had, and Elias felt the weight of her words pressing against him like a tide, for suddenly his mission was no longer about peace treaties or trade agreements. It was about representing his entire species before a queen who could decide if Earth would be guided, ignored, or destroyed by its own reckless ambition. The silence stretched between them, broken only by the faint hum of the relics, and Elias realized this was a test, not of politics, but of humanity itself. And though fear gripped him, another feeling stirred within, a stubborn spark of defiance, the same human spirit that had carried his people through wars, through loss, through the endless darkness of space. And he straightened, meeting her gaze not with arrogance, but with quiet determination. And though he had no clear answers to give, he knew that whatever humanity's fate, they deserved the chance to stand and choose it themselves. And for the first time, the Queen's expression softened, her smile returning not with mystery, but with a trace of approval. And Elias sensed that he had passed the first part of a greater trial, though the true test was yet to come, waiting beyond this chamber, hidden in the depths of a destiny humanity had never imagined. And as the doors opened behind him with a low groan, he followed her into the unknown, his heart heavy with fear yet burning with hope, for he understood now that the galaxy was not ruled by armies or crowns, but by hidden powers, and he, a lone human diplomat, had just stepped into their world. He would carry this burden with honor, and as he straightened, the starlight around him shifted, opening into visions of Earth, his home, small yet fierce, fragile yet full of unyielding spirit. And for a moment he saw it as he must have seen it, a world not defined by its wars, but by its potential to rise above them. And when the vision faded, the Queen spoke one last time, her words clear and unwavering. War builds empires, Elias, but only those who rise above war can guide the stars. And with that, the chamber dimmed and the doors opened behind him, signaling it was time for him to return. And though he stepped back into the grand hall where his mission had begun, nothing felt the same, for he no longer carried only the weight of diplomacy, but the responsibility of representing humanity's heart to a galaxy far greater than he had ever imagined. And as the Queen watched silently from her throne, her smile neither commanding nor distant, but quietly approving, Elias knew this was not the end, but the beginning of something vast, a path where humans would walk not as conquerors or subjects, but as equals among those who shaped destiny itself. And as he prepared to leave the alien world, the sphere still glowing faintly in his hand, he felt the stars above calling to him, no longer cold or unreachable, but alive with promise. And for the first time, Elias understood that the greatest power humanity carried was not fear, not strength, not weapons, but the simple truth of compassion, the courage to choose hope. And with that realization burning like fire in his chest, he stepped forward into a future where humans were no longer just survivors of war, but guardians standing higher than it,